So, since starting this journey and putting this journal together, I've been writing a lot of things down and having some really cool memories that I just kind of set aside, I guess. And so, one day when I was grocery shopping, I was going down the produce aisle and I got this whiff, a certain smell. And I literally stopped in my tracks and stood there for a second and said, "What does that smell remind me of?" And so I looked and I turned around to go see, what fruits were there, what was it I was really smelling. And they had a bushel there full of guavas. Now, I don't know if in your area you can get guavas or if they grow, naturally in your area. But they have a very, very distinct odor, especially when they are ripe. And it instantly threw me back into time. I think because I've had all these memories, kind of surfacing, and I've been writing them down. And one thing I had not written down at all was this elderly couple that I met when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And what was unique to them and how that smell made me think of them was in their front yard, they had two guava trees. And it was the smell, when you walked in, you would go into their home, the whole house smelled like that. We used to pick them up every Sunday. They loved ice cream. Neither one of them drove because they were already older when I met them. And so my parents would go over and pick them up, and we'd all go over and have some ice cream at the local little ice cream shop. And when they would get into the car, I would get this whiff of guava. You'd go into their house. If you spend any time with them, you started smelling like that. And because I was just a kid at the time, I thought that smell was the smell of old people. They were already elderly. They were like in their 80s. And I didn't know that many people that old. They were about the oldest people I was associating with at my age. And everything about them smelled like that. So I always thought, for the longest time, that odor was unique to them because they were old. I did not find out till years later that it was called guava, not old age smell. But anyway, so that made me think about them. And I was starting to think about when I met them, and why they were special to me and what kind of impression they left with me besides, the smell of old people / guava. All right. Well, what I learned from them basically was love. When I put it down into a nutshell, it was love and what unconditional love meant. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any photographs of them, but I went looking through different photographs that I could find that, were copy-free, and I found a few that really capsulized my memories of them. Now, this one right here, it's them eating some ice cream. And like I mentioned before, every Sunday that I knew them, we picked them up and we would go get ice cream. Now, his favorite ice cream was strawberry. Her favorite ice cream was chocolate. Very simple, very straightforward. He would get 2 scoops and she would get 2 scoops of her favorite. Then after they each had finished one of their scoops, they would trade their ice creams and eat each other's ice creams. So as a little kid, I'm thinking, well, why don't you just get one of each? And that way you don't have to trade. And then she said, what would be the romance in that? As a little kid, it went right over my head. It really didn't mean anything to me. It was like, okay, whatever. I was 6 or 7 years old. But as I reflect on that, yeah, here they are, 80 years old. They still wanted to share, and they had that romantic moment where they switched their ice creams and ate each other's ice cream cone to the end. And I never forgot that. Even though I didn't know what it meant at the time, I never forget that. Well, what's interesting about them, her name is Soledad and his name was Genaro. And they were both born in Mexico. And when they got married around the turn of the century, early 1900s, like 1902, 1903. They were born in the late 1800s in Mexico. And while they were young, just barely married, was when all the revolution and different things were happening down in Mexico. And one of the things that was going on during their time in Mexico here, I wrote a few things that I remember, because after their death, after I was older, I started researching the time period in which they lived in Mexico. And during the time that they were there, Pancho Villa was the guy that was sort of like their Robin Hood. He was a champion of the working class. And so there was a revolution going on at the time. Well, it was brewing at this particular time. And then the First World War started, and even though Mexico technically was neutral during the First World War, they were having an internal war where there was a lot of violence in the streets, there was upheaval, there was poverty, all kinds of things. And at that time, over 1 million people from Mexico fled to the United States looking for safety and for protection and really for the American dream. And Soledad and Genaro were two of those people that came up here, very young, and created a life for themselves. I found this picture, and it reminded me of them, because whenever I would see them, they were always touching each other one way or another, either holding their hand or leaned up against, or he would have his arm around her. And it was just always so cute to see them so affectionate. Like I said, I was very young, and I never even saw my own parents as affectionate toward each other, as they did. So it really left an impression on me of the love that they had for each other. I was thinking also, too, of their backyard. They had an aviary in their backyard. As I remember it, I could lay down on the bottom, and there was a lot of room. I'm thinking it was probably like 10 feet wide, maybe. And I know it was quite tall. And he had dried trees in there, and they raised canaries and parakeets. And they were all over the place. And I would go in there as a little kid and sit down and feed them apples and different things like that. And just had the greatest time. And I've always, had an affinity toward birds and loved them in art. And I used to raise parrots. We would rescue parrots, and, always really had some type of birds in my life. And so, I don't know, maybe I was drawn to that because of my experience back in their aviary, back there in their backyard. But that was his thing, and they would teach the canaries to sing, and she would teach the canaries to speak Spanish, and It was just a really, really fun place to be. Another memory that is very clear about the way that Genaro would show his affection for his wife was if you were there in the mornings, he would braid her hair every morning. She had these beautiful brushes and combs that she had up on top of her vanity, and he would brush her hair and he would braid it. And then in the evening, before they went to bed, he would brush it out again and braid it again before she went to bed. So that was an image that I always had, in my mind, about her. And they would play this music that I later would come to know that it was called bolero music. And it was the very romantic type of singing. And their favorite group was a group that was called Los Panchos. They were a trio, and I still like their music to this day. I think because I listened to it so much in their home that I really like that type of Mexican music. And there was this favorite song that they had, and it was called La Historia de un Amor, the history of a love. And at the end of this video of me showing you my spread, I have a process video that I'll play, and during that I'm going to play, it's not Los Panchos because I couldn't find them singing it, but it's another group singing the same song, La Historia de un Amor. But I wanted to share with you very quickly here some of the words from that song translated into English. It says, a love story. You're by my side no more, my love, and in my soul all I have left is loneliness. And if I can't see you anymore, why did God make me love you? Just to make me suffer more? You were always my reason to exist. To worship you was my religion. And if your kisses I would find the warmth you gave to me, the love and passion. This is a love story. There's no other that's the same, as it made me understand all that is good, all that is bad. It brought light into my life just to extinguish said light later. Alas, what is a dark life? Without your love, I won't survive. And then it goes on into the chorus over again. Well, Soledad lived to be approximately, I think she was 85, 86, something like that. And he was a little older. 96. And between 96 and 97, we could gather what their age was. And so what was interesting here, I'll just read what I wrote as far as my memory of, the end of their life. I put down here, they taught me love. They were always together and loving toward each other. When Soledad died at the age of 97, they had been married over 70 years. The day that Soledad died, Genaro told us he would not be able to live without her. He died in his sleep that night. 8 hours was too long for him to be apart. So to Genaro and Soledad, they taught me love.
Ya no estás más a mi lado, corazón. En el alma solo tengo soledad. ya no puedo verte, porque Dios me hizo quererte para hacerme sufrir más. Siempre fuiste la razón de mi existir, adorarte para mí fue religión. Y en tus besos yo encontraba el calor que me brindaba, el amor y la pasión. Es la historia de un amor como no hay otro igual, que me hizo comprender todo el bien, todo el mal, que le dio luz a mi vida, apagándola después. Ay, qué vida tan oscura, sin tu amor no viviré. Es la historia de un amor. Es la historia de un amor como no hay otro igual, que me hizo comprender todo el bien, todo el mal, que le dio luz a mi vida, apagándola después. Ay, qué vida tan oscura, sin tu amor no viviré. Es la historia de un amor. Ya no estás más a mi lado, corazón. En el alma solo tengo soledad. Y si ya no puedo verte, porque Dios me hizo quererte para hacerme sufrir más. Siempre fuiste la razón de mi existir, adorarte para mí fue religión. Y en tus besos yo encontraba el calor que me brindaba, el amor y la pasión. Es la historia de un amor como no hay otro igual, que me hizo comprender todo el bien, todo el mal, que le dio luz a mi vida, apagándola después. Ay, qué vida tan oscura, sin tu amor no viviré. Es la historia de un amor. Es la historia de un amor como no hay otro igual, que me hizo comprender todo el bien, todo el mal, que le dio luz a mi vida, apagándola después. Ay, qué vida tan oscura, sin tu amor no viviré. Es la historia de un amor.